Snap! I gave Clarissa a heart attack. See what I did there? Telly lost his snappy thing, his Hollywood director snappy thing. So I'm feeling like I need to do the snappy stuff. Morning, everybody. Welcome back to MHAB at the kitchen here. We're making sandwiches, we're making salads, we're doing fun stuff. One of the things we're doing today is we're making English muffins. People think English muffins are, man, how do they make those? They're kind of weird, they don't look like, and it's not like making bread. It's really, really simple. So we're going to make English muffins today, and next week we're going to make them today, pop them in the freezer after they cool, and next week we're making breakfast sandwiches for lunch at MHAB Fresh for the store. So that's really cool. Simple ingredients: flour, sugar, salt, milk, yeast, egg. There's one more ingredient. What am I missing, Telly?
Fun.
Fun. No. We always have fun. Okay, two ingredients. Fun, and butter. Butter, that's what it is. All right, so we'll talk more about this a little bit later, but I'm going to weigh my flour. The recipe calls for 4.5 cups of flour, and we'll do that later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh my flour. Telly, can you get this scale in there? All right, so the scale is there. I'm going to put an empty bowl on it. I'm going to hit tare. So now it reads 0, even with the bowl on it. You can see the bowl weighs 5.5 ounces. So there's an empty bowl reading 0 on the scale. And what I'm looking for is 4.5 cups of flour, and it takes 4.25 ounces per cup. So I'm looking for, somebody do that arithmetic for me. I'm looking for 19 1/8 ounces of flour, which is 1 pound 3 1/8 ounces. So there's 11.5 ounces, 14 ounces, 1 pound 1.4, going a little bit at a time, 2.6, 3.05, 3.3, a little out, there we go. So there's 1 pound 3 ounces and a little bit, so 19 1/4 ounces of flour, which is 4.5 cups, and we'll explain a little bit more about that later, as I said. So flour, and everything is going directly into the bowl of my mixer. Flour, and I need about 1.5 teaspoons of salt, maybe a teaspoon, maybe close to 2 teaspoons. Let's see how I did. I do most of this stuff by eye, so yeah. So I've done this enough that I get kind of an eyeball. You'll get the feel for that. Measure something out, throw it in your hand, say, okay, that's what a tablespoon looks like, that's what a teaspoon looks like. Yeast. I'm going to use a packet of yeast. The commercially available packets of yeast that you get, they usually come in a strip of 3 in the supermarket. It's 2 teaspoons, which is exactly what this recipe calls for. I suppose they may have actually even worked this recipe so that you could do that. So yeast goes in. I'm going to put in 1 egg that's lightly beaten. Need a fork. And I'm not going to worry too much about how beaten that is, just a bit. So you can see that's not quite as much as you beat the egg before you put it in the skillet if you were doing a scrambled egg. 1 3/4 cup milk. Now, the milk temperature is important. Do you have the milk there? You can see it. For those of you, I'm a new grandparent, so I've been getting practice on this. For those of you who have kids, you want it about the temperature of a baby's bottle. You want it 95, 100, 105 degrees. The reason for that is yeast works better in that range. It likes, if it's cold, it gets the active yeast gets tired and lays around like a I don't know, like a turtle that's in the middle of winter. It doesn't do much. If it gets too hot, yeast is alive, and if it gets too hot, it'll die. You can kill it. So it wants to be, kind of lukewarm. And there's 1 3/4 cups of whole milk, a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and 3 tablespoons of butter. And that's all going to go into the mixer, and we're going to turn it on medium-high and let it go for about 4 or 5 minutes. This is a dough you don't work a lot with you don't work with your hands very much because it's very sticky. And if you try to work it with your hands, you'll end up with kind of a mess. So snap the bowl in place. This is a KitchenAid mixer. They're dynamite mixers. They're a little expensive, but you can do this with a dough hook on just a regular hand mixer, or you can do it with a wooden spoon. It's a fair amount of work with a wooden spoon, but it's simple. It's not difficult. It's just a fair amount of work. If I got everything in there, I got sugar, flour, salt, milk, egg, yeast, butter, and fun and love. Okay, I'm going to turn this on until it gets started nice and slowly. And once it gets going so it's not spewing flour all over, I'm going to turn it up to medium-high. And I'm a big believer in timers. Hey, Clarissa, set me a timer for 4 minutes, please. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. So we'll let that run for about 4 minutes, and then we'll see if it gets glossy and starts to come away from the sides of the bowl, and we'll be ready to fly. Timer just went off, so we're coming back. Can you get in there, Telly? Can you see that? Yep. I'm going to turn this down a little bit, and you can see how the dough is stretching and pulling. It's a little bit glossy, kind of a matte gloss. So that's about where it wants to be. So we'll shut that off and take this down, and we're going to scrape this into a bowl, cover it with some plastic wrap. Kind of make it into a ball as it goes into this bowl, cover it with some plastic wrap, and set it. We've got a big range here. We're going to put it right, or a big deck oven, stacking ovens. We're going to put it on top of the oven. To rise, and we're going to want it to about double in size. So I'm going to put some plastic wrap on that and put it on top of the oven. You want to be careful when you put it when you're deciding. You want to be careful when you're deciding where you put things to rise. Once again, it's important to remember that high temperature kills yeast. So you want it to be in a kind of a gentle heat. The top of our oven, hovers at around 100, 110 degrees, something like that. And there's no air movement up there, which is important for things to rise. That's the other reason you're covering things is to keep the air off it. Okay, so I'm going to put, oh, look at that, would you?
Through the magic of television.
The magic of television, we found a batch that's already done. So this is what it looks like after it's doubled from that. It's the same, it's exact same stuff, recipe done exactly the same, and there we go. Now Thomas's, the English Muffin Company, talks about nooks and crannies. And if you can see all those bubbles, that's the gas expanding when the yeast degrades and decomposes, and that's what causes that open crumb, which gives us lots of nooks and crannies. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little flour on a board, which I'm not trying to add flour to the dough. All I'm trying to do is to make a surface that's going to not stick to. The dough's going to not stick to. Gently pull that off. And I am going to cut this. I'm going to gently, not really knead it, but I'm going to gently let this dough collapse. You can see as I'm scraping it out how much it's collapsing back to that original size, because those bubbles are breaking as they're quite fragile. They're breaking as I'm tipping this out onto a floured board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this dough into, the recipe calls for 16. This is a recipe to make 16 English muffins. We want them to be big. I'm going to do it into about a dozen. So I'm going to cut this in half. And then I'm going to cut it in half again, giving me 4. Then each one of these quarters I'm going to make into a third, which will give me a total of 12. And I'm going to put those guys, once they're broken into thirds, onto a sheet pan for another final little rise. Now you remember from going to the supermarket that every time you see an English muffin, it's got large grain, usually cornmeal or durum semolina. I'm just using cornmeal, and that'll keep things from sticking. So there's a muffin, and there are two more. They don't look much like muffins yet, but I'm going to make those into rounds. This is a sticky dough, and that's all right. If you keep a little bit of dust on little flour on your hands, it allows you to work it a little bit without famous last words. And there's a quarter. We'll cut that into thirds again to make 3 more. Now when I get all these on here, I am going to clean my hands off a little bit and give them a little bit better shape, just because I do want them to be look a little bit like round English muffins. So I'm just kind of going to roll that excess dough off my hands, because it is sticky, and when I touch the muffins, they're going to want to stick to the stickiness. So flour my hands up a little bit, and here I can gently form these guys a little bit so they're a little rounder. And you see they move quite easily on this sheet with the cornmeal on it. All right, so I'm going to lay another piece of parchment on that, and we're going to let that sit for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and then they're going to be ready to be cooked. So I'm not going to press that on, I'm just going to lay it gently on and set it in a rack for half an hour, 20 minutes. We have taken the 12 English muffins, made the batch for 16, did it in 12 because we want larger sizes, laid those on a sheet pan, allowed them to come up for another 20 minutes to do a small secondary rise. Turned my griddle on. We're really fortunate here. I got a great big griddle. I got a 24 by 24 griddle. I got lots of space to do all these at one batch. You may find that you need to do this in 2 batches at home. Or a big cast iron skillet is good. Dry non-stick skillet will work. If you've got a griddle, that's going to be your best bet. First thing we're going to do on the griddle is we're going to liberally put cornmeal. You could do this with durum semolina, but what you really need is something nice, big grain. You can see the size of those grains.
Yep.
And that keeps the surface of the muffins from being directly on the steel, and allows them to release. You see how these guys are releasing from the parchment pretty easily because they're covered. The parchment was covered with cornmeal before we put these on for their secondary rise. Probably 6 to 7 minutes. I don't have a thermostat on this griddle, so I can't tell you how hot it is, but it's, I would say, medium-low. It's got some hot spots. You can see on the griddle I'm getting a little coloration in that corn meal over here. So So I want to kind of monitor that and stay away from that. And these guys just need, they need time and just to hang out. All right, so what you can see here is I'm moving these around a little bit, that they're already, the bottom is already begun to crust up a little bit. I don't know if you can hear that, but you can see that, that they're not sticking at all. I'm going to slide these around a little bit. As I mentioned, I do have kind of a hot spot on my griddle. So I'm going to try to in an effort to keep things cooking kind of at the same rate, I'm going to move the stuff that's been on the slower spot on the griddle over a little bit. I've also got two controls, so bump that up just a touch. Look at that, Telly. That looks like an English muffin, doesn't it? I'm not really very accustomed to using thermometers in baked goods, but this recipe says it wants about 200 degrees on the interior of these muffins, so they've got a little ways to go. What do you think? Can we make English muffins?
Oh, yay, I had to try it.
Ah, thank you.
Telly?
Oh my god, yes.
Thank you. Nailed it.
Yeah, seriously, this is really good. It's better than anything you'd buy.
That'll do, pig.